The old man in the frayed black coat sat beside me every Friday, whispering that I should never let them write my story for me. I dismissed him as just another homeless philosopher until 3 months later, when I watched him walk before a judge in Riverton Bay. That soup kitchen regular was actually a billionaire in hiding, my estranged grandfather, and he had been keeping receipts on the family that stole every dime I had for 20 years. My name is Lucy Campbell, and at 32 years old, I had become an expert at two things: framing a photograph to hide the ugly parts of a room, and hiding the fact that I was starving while holding a $3,000 camera. The air inside the 5th Street Haven soup kitchen always smelled the same on Friday mornings. It was a heavy, damp mixture of industrial disinfectant, boiled cabbage, and wet wool. To anyone else, it was the scent of poverty. But to me, at 7 in the morning, it smelled like salvation. I adjusted the strap of my Canon around my neck, flashing my press pass at the volunteer by the door. I was technically here on assignment for FableGrid Studio, the mid-level agency in Riverton Bay where I worked as a senior editor and photographer. We were doing a pro bono documentary series on urban resilience, which was corporate speak for taking black and white photos of poor people to make rich people feel something at charity galas. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was documenting the line, but spiritually and financially. I belonged in it. I moved down the line of metal folding tables, snapping candids of the ladles pouring thick vegetable stew into styrofoam bowls. Click, a volunteer smiling. Click, steam rising off the pot. When I reached the end of the serving line, I did what I had done for the past month. I lowered my camera, gave a tired, conspiratorial smile to Denise, the kitchen director, and accepted a bowl for myself. She knew. We never spoke about it, but she knew I wasn't just tasting the product for quality control. I found a spot at a chipped formica table in the far corner, away from the main thoroughfare where the donors usually stood around patting themselves on the back. The soup was hot, salty, and thick with potatoes. I ate quickly, my eyes scanning the room, a habit from years of looking for the perfect shot. That was when I saw him. I called him the Friday man in my head because I never saw him on Tuesdays or Thursdays. He was sitting 2 tables away, wearing a black wool coat that had likely been expensive 20 years ago but was now frayed at the cuffs and thinning at the elbows. He didn't eat like the others. Most people here ate with a frantic, defensive speed, guarding their plates with their forearms. The Friday man ate with a slow, deliberate rhythm. He broke his bread carefully. He wiped his mouth with a paper napkin after every few bites. He spoke to the people around him, but he listened more than he talked. He had a way of looking at you that made you feel like he was reading the fine print on your soul. I must have been staring, because he stopped mid-bite and looked straight at me. His eyes were a piercing, clear gray, startlingly bright in a face mapped with deep wrinkles. He didn't smile, but he nodded at the empty chair across from him. I hesitated, then picked up my bowl and moved. There was a strange gravity to him. "You are not really taking pictures today," he said. His voice was gravelly but clear, lacking the slur or stutter common among the regulars who battled addiction. "I am waiting for the light to change," I lied, spooning up a chunk of carrot. "Documentation takes patience." He hummed, a low sound in his throat. "You eat like someone who is afraid the plate will be taken away." I froze. The warmth of the soup suddenly felt heavy in my stomach. It has been a long week. "Don't let them write the story for you," he said. It came out of nowhere. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at a stain on the wall, or maybe through it. "Excuse me." He turned those gray eyes back to me. "The people who put you in this chair, the ones who made you hungry, do not let them turn you into the villain in your own life just because you are angry. Anger is easy. Strategy is hard." I let out a short, dry laugh. "I think you are overestimating my life, sir. I am just a photographer having a bad month." "If you say so," he said, going back to his bread. "Just remember, paper beats mouth, always." I finished my soup in silence, dismissing him as just another street philosopher, one of those men who had read too many books and lost too many jobs. I didn't know his name. I didn't know that he was watching me with the precise calculation of a grandmaster looking at a pawn. I just wiped my mouth, grabbed my camera, and walked out into the gray morning of Riverton Bay. But his words stuck in my throat like a dry crumb. The ones who put you in this chair. I walked 5 blocks to the nearest subway station, fighting the urge to vomit. The nausea wasn't from the food. It was from the memory that those words had triggered. The flashback that had been playing on a loop in my head for 72 hours. It had happened on Tuesday. I had been sitting in my apartment, a tiny studio with a leaky faucet that I tolerated because the rent was low. I was scrolling through the Riverton Community Bank app on my phone. It was my morning ritual, my prayer. I tapped on the savings account labeled Studio Fund. $14,250.80. That number was beautiful. It was 4 years of skipped vacations. It was 4 years of shooting weddings I hated, editing commercial catalogs until my eyes burned, and eating instant noodles. It was the deposit for the space in the Pier Line Arts Quarter, an old warehouse with north-facing windows and exposed brick that I was going to turn into my own photography studio. I had the lease agreement sitting on my desk, ready to be signed. I just needed to reach $15,000 to cover the first 6 months of operating costs. I was so close. I could practically smell the developer chemicals and fresh paint. I put the phone down to make coffee. I was grinding the beans when my phone buzzed. Ping. I glanced at it. A notification from the bank. Transaction approved, Serenity Day Spa, $450. I frowned. That had to be a mistake. I didn't go to spas. I reached for the phone, wiping coffee grounds from my hands. Ping. Transaction approved. Riverton Jewelers, $2,800. My heart skipped a beat. It was a hard, physical thud against my ribs. I unlocked the phone, my fingers trembling slightly. Ping, ping, ping. The notifications were coming in a machine gun rhythm. Transaction approved, Horizon Air, $1,200. Transaction approved, Tech Haven Electronics, $3,500. I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face so fast I felt dizzy. I watched the number, my beautiful, 4-year number, plummet. 14,000 became 10,000. 10,000 became 6. 6 became 2. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I frantically tapped the screen, trying to freeze the card. But my fingers were clumsy with panic. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the floor. I scrambled for it, logging back in. Current balance, $6.27. I sat on the kitchen floor, my back against the refrigerator, and dialed the bank's fraud hotline. I waited on hold for 12 minutes. 12 minutes where I couldn't breathe, where the world had narrowed down to the sound of soft jazz piano and my own racing pulse. Finally, a woman answered. Riverton Community Bank. This is Sarah. How can I help you? My account, I gasped. Someone hacked my account. They drained it. Just now. Thousands of dollars. You have to stop it. Okay, ma'am. Calm down. Let me verify your identity. We went through the security questions. My mother's maiden name. My first pet. I answered them with a voice that sounded like it belonged to a stranger. Okay, Ms. Campbell, Sarah said, her voice devoid of urgency. I see the transactions. Let me look at the details. There was a clicking of a keyboard that sounded like gunshots in my ear. Ma'am, these transactions were card present or verified with a secure PIN. There is no flag for external intrusion. That is impossible, I screamed. I have my card right here. I am in my kitchen. Well, Sarah said, sounding bored now. Do you have an authorized user on the account? No, it is my savings. It is just me. Are you sure I show a secondary card issued 8 months ago to an Ethan Ward? The name hit me like a physical blow. Ethan, my husband. The silence on the line stretched out. I closed my eyes, and the memory washed over me. 8 months ago, Ethan had come home, his face blotchy with tears, shaking. His consulting startup was failing. He needed to pay a retainer for a lawyer to settle a dispute with a vendor, or he was going to be sued into bankruptcy. He had begged. He had cried on this very kitchen floor. I just need a backup. Lucy, just in case. I won't touch it. I swear on my life. Just put me on the account so I can show proof of funds if the court asks. Please, we are a team. Right. I had been so stupid. So incredibly, lovingly stupid. I had called the bank. I had added him. I had given him the PIN. And then, because nothing happened for 8 months, because he had been so sweet, so seemingly recovering, I had forgotten. Ma'am, Sarah asked, do you know Mr. Ward? He is my husband, I whispered. Well, then, since he is an authorized user and he used the correct PIN, this isn't fraud. It is a civil matter. You authorized him to use the funds. He stole it, I said, my voice cracking. He stole everything. I am sorry, Ms. Campbell. The bank cannot get involved in domestic disputes. You will have to sort this out with him directly. Is there anything else I can help you with? I hung up. I sat there for a long time, looking at the transactions again. I looked at the names, the spa, the jewelry store, the electronics shop, and then I saw the last one, the one that had taken the remaining $4,000, leaving me with pocket change. Transaction approved Ward Legacy Consulting, LLC. It wasn't a vendor. It wasn't a store. It was his parents' company. He hadn't just spent the money. He had transferred the bulk of it directly into his family's business. He had looted my future to pad their bottom line. I stood up from the floor, my knees shaking. I called Ethan, straight to voicemail. I called him again, voicemail. I called his mother, Vivian. It rang once, then went to voicemail. They were gone. They had taken the money and ghosted me. Back in the present. The cold wind of Riverton Bay bit through my jacket. I was standing outside the soup kitchen, the taste of charity soup still in my mouth. I had $6.27 to my name. My rent was due in 10 days. My dream studio was gone. I clutched my camera strap tighter. The old man's voice echoed in my head, louder than the traffic on 5th Street. Paper beats mouth. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to call Ethan and beg. I wasn't going to scream at the sky. I pulled out my phone and opened the bank app one more time. I didn't look at the balance. I looked at the transaction list. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I opened my email and sent them to myself. I walked toward my car, a beat-up sedan that needed an oil change I couldn't afford. I didn't know who the Friday man was, but he was right. If they wanted to treat me like a line item on a balance sheet, I would become the audit they never saw coming. The soup kitchen was behind me, but I knew I would be back next Friday. Not for the soup, but because I had a feeling the old man in the frayed coat knew exactly what kind of war I was about to start. Driving my rusted sedan into Westbrook Hills felt like piloting a garbage scow into a royal harbor. The exhaust pipe of my car was held up by a wire coat hanger, and every time I hit a bump, it rattled against the asphalt, a metallic cough that echoed through the silent, tree-lined streets. Westbrook Hills was where the air smelled different, like freshly cut grass, sprinkler systems, and old money that had been scrubbed clean of its origins. I parked in the driveway of the Ward estate, right behind Leonard's gleaming black Mercedes SUV. My car looked like a bruise on the pristine concrete. I didn't bother locking it. There was nothing left inside to steal, and my bank account was already empty. I still had the key to the front door. Ethan had given it to me 3 years ago, back when I thought marrying him meant gaining a family, not entering a Shark Tank. I turned the lock and pushed the heavy oak door open. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of insulation and high ceilings, not emptiness. I could hear the clinking of silverware coming from the sunroom at the back of the house. I walked down the hallway, my sneakers squeaking on the marble floors. I passed the portraits on the wall, Leonard shaking hands with the mayor, Vivian posing with orphans in a country I knew she couldn't locate on a map. I stopped in the archway of the sunroom. It was a scene straight out of a lifestyle magazine, the kind I edited photos for but could never afford. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a breakfast spread that looked like a Renaissance painting. There were platters of pastries, exotic fruits, and a silver coffee service, but my eyes zeroed in on the details. I was a photographer. It was my job to notice the composition. In the center of the table sat a new set of crystal glasses. I recognized the brand instantly. Waterford, the Lismore pattern. I had photographed a wedding registry last month that featured them. $600 a stem. Next to the orange juice was a bottle of wine, open and breathing. Opus 1, $700 a bottle. My stomach twisted. I wasn't looking at breakfast. I was looking at my studio deposit. I was looking at 4 years of my life, liquid and solid, sitting on their table. Leonard was reading the Financial Times, folded crisp and neat. Ethan was staring into his coffee cup, looking like a man waiting for a firing squad. Vivian was the first to see me. She was wearing a silk dressing gown that shimmered like spilled oil. It was new. I had seen the transaction for the boutique on the statement I was clutching in my sweating hand. "Lucy!" Vivian exclaimed, her face arranging itself into a mask of delighted surprise. She stood up, arms wide, the silk rustling softly. "Darling, why didn't you call? We would have set a place for you. You look tired. Have you been eating enough?" The audacity took my breath away. She moved to hug me, smelling of expensive lavender soap. I stepped back, dodging her embrace. The rejection made her pause, her hands hovering in the air like confused birds. "Cut the act. Vivian," I said, my voice shaking not with fear, but with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my throat. "Lucy, honey," she cooed, tilting her head. "You sound upset. Is this about Ethan? I told him he should call you more often." But I didn't let her finish. I slammed the stack of papers onto the breakfast table. The heavy sound made the crystal glasses jump. "I went to the bank," I said. "I saw the transactions. Ward Legacy Consulting, the jewelry store, the spa, the airline tickets." The room went deadly silent. Ethan shrank into his chair, refusing to meet my eyes. Leonard didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just turned a page, the paper crisp and loud in the quiet room. "Oh, that," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming softer, more reasonable. She waved a hand dismissively. "It is just a misunderstanding, darling, a temporary liquidity issue." "You drained my account," I said, pointing at the papers. "You took $14,000. That was my studio money. You knew that was my studio money." "We borrowed it," Vivian corrected, looking hurt. "Borrowed. Lucy, there is a difference. The new Mercy Outreach Gala is coming up next month. You know how important this is. We are raising money for the homeless. We needed bridge capital to secure the venue and the catering. It is God's work. Lucy, surely you want to be part of that God's work." I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You spent $400 at a day spa on Tuesday. Is Facials for the Homeless a new program I didn't know about?" Vivian's lip trembled. She pressed a hand to her chest. "I have to look presentable for the donors. If I look tired, they lose confidence in the organization. It is an investment in the cause. You are being very literal-minded about this." "I am being literal because I have $6 in my bank account," I snapped. I turned to Leonard. "And you? You are the CEO. You signed off on the transfer to your shell company." Leonard finally looked up. His eyes were blue and flat, like shards of glass. He took a sip of his coffee, then set the cup down slowly. "Lower your voice," he said. "You are upsetting the atmosphere." "I will lower my voice when I get my money back," I said. My eyes dropped to his hand resting on the table. The light caught the bezel of a watch. It was a thick, heavy chronograph, with a silver face and a leather strap. I knew watches. I had shot a catalog for a luxury reseller 6 months ago. That was a Breitling Navitimer. "Nice watch," I said, my voice trembling. "Retail price is around $5,000, isn't it?" I checked my statement. There was a transaction at the luxury jeweler on Wednesday for $4,800. I looked at him, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "That is my studio on your wrist, Leonard." Leonard didn't flinch. He pulled his cuff down, covering the watch. "A man in my position needs to project success. Wealth attracts wealth. If I show up to a donor meeting wearing a plastic timepiece, they assume the charity is failing. It is a business expense. It is theft. I screamed. Vivian burst into tears. It was a sudden, practiced explosion of grief. She collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands. "How can you be so cruel?" she sobbed. "After everything we have done for you, we welcomed you into this family. We treat you like a daughter. And you come in here, screaming about money. We are family. Lucy, family helps each other. You are young. You have talent. You can earn more money. We are in a crisis here." I looked at Ethan, my husband, the man who had promised to love and cherish me. He was looking at his mother, his face twisted with guilt, but not guilt for what they had done to me. Guilt that I was making his mother cry. "Ethan," I said, pleading. "Please, tell them how hard I worked for that money. Tell them about the nights I stayed up editing until sunrise." Ethan looked at me, then looked at the floor. He took a deep breath. "Lucy," he said quietly, "you are making a scene." "A scene?" I stared at him. "They stole our future." "It is not stealing," Ethan said, his voice gaining a little strength, parroting the script he had clearly been fed. "It is a reallocation of family assets. I authorized it. It was a joint account. Technically, half that money was mine anyway." I felt like I had been slapped. "You put $300 into that account in 4 years. Ethan, it was my work, my sweat. I have to live in this family." "Lucy," he said, finally meeting my eyes. There was a terrifying emptiness there. "You are blowing this out of proportion. Mom and Dad are under a lot of pressure with the charity. We need to support them. Stop being so selfish." Selfish. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Leonard cleared his throat. He stood up. He wasn't a tall man, but he knew how to take up space. He walked around the table until he was standing right in front of me. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Here is what is going to happen," Leonard said. His voice was low, calm, and terrifying. "You are going to apologize to my wife for upsetting her. Then you are going to get in your car and go to work. We will pay you back when the gala funds come in. Maybe in 6 months, maybe a year." "No," I said. "I want it now, or I'm going to the police." Leonard smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "The police," he chuckled softly. "Go ahead. Call them. My brother, Marcus, is the desk sergeant at the Southside Precinct. Do you know what he will tell the responding officers? He will tell them this is a civil dispute between a husband and wife. He will tell them that you authorized Ethan to use the card, which you did." I reached for my phone. "I will show them the statements. I will show them where the money went. And I will show them a hysterical woman who is harassing a respected philanthropic family," Leonard said. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. "Think carefully. Lucy, you work in this town. You rely on your reputation. Fable Grid Studio handles our marketing. I know the owner, David, very well. We play golf on Sundays." My blood ran cold. "If you make a fuss," Leonard continued, his voice smooth as silk, "if you file a report, if you tell anyone about this, I will have to have a sad conversation with David. I will have to tell him that I am worried about your mental state, that you have been acting unstable, erratic, that perhaps the stress of the job is too much for you." He paused to let that sink in. "Do you think Fable Grid will hire a freelancer who is labeled psychologically unstable by one of their biggest clients? Do you think any agency in Riverton Bay will hire you if word gets out that you sued your own husband's family?" I stood there, frozen. The trap had snapped shut. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had built a cage around me before I even knew I was in danger. "You are monsters," I whispered. "We are survivors," Leonard said, checking his stolen watch. "And we have a schedule to keep. Now, run along, and fix your hair. You look unhinged." Vivian looked up from her hands, her eyes dry, the tears miraculously gone. "We really do love you. Lucy, This is for your own good. You need to learn to share. I looked at the breakfast table one last time. The light caught the crystal glasses, refracting into little rainbows on the white tablecloth. It looked beautiful. It looked perfect. And it was built entirely on lies and my stolen labor. I turned around and walked out. I didn't slam the door this time. I felt too hollow for that. I walked out to my rusted sedan, my wallet empty, my future erased. As I keyed the ignition and listened to the engine cough to life, I realized something terrifying. The Ward family didn't hate me. Hate would have been personal. They didn't care enough to hate me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was just a resource. I was a battery they had drained dry, and now they were annoyed that the empty husk was still taking up space in their driveway. I put the car in reverse and backed out onto the street. Leonard was right about one thing: I had authorized the user, but he was wrong about the rest. He thought he had silenced me with fear. He didn't know that hunger does something to fear. It metabolizes it. It turns it into fuel. I drove away from the manicured lawns of Westbrook Hills, the taste of bile in my throat, knowing that the next stop wasn't home. It was the police station. Even if his brother was there, even if they laughed at me, I had to put it on paper. Paper beats mouth, the old man had said. I hoped he was right, because right now, paper was the only weapon I had left. The fluorescent lights of the Riverton South Precinct hummed with a sound that felt like a drill boring directly into my temples. I sat on a hard plastic chair that was bolted to the floor, clutching a manila folder so tightly my knuckles had turned white. Inside were the printed screenshots of the bank transfers, a copy of my marriage certificate, and a printout of the text messages I had sent Ethan, none of which had been answered. Across the desk, Officer Miller typed on his computer with agonizing slowness. He was a heavy-set man with a mustache that looked like it was filtering out his compassion. He hadn't looked me in the eye since I sat down. So, let me get this straight, Miller said, pausing his typing to take a sip from a styrofoam cup. You gave him the PIN number, personally, verbally. 8 months ago, I said, my voice sounding thin and brittle in the sterile room. For a specific emergency that never happened, I did not authorize him to drain the account to buy luxury watches and fund his father's shell company this week. But he is your husband, Miller said, leaning back. And his name is on the account as an authorized user. He stole $14,000, I said, trying to keep the hysteria from rising in my throat. And the money went to Ward Legacy Consulting. That is his parents. That is theft by deception. Miller sighed. It was a long, heavy sigh that told me exactly where I stood in the hierarchy of his day. Look, Mrs. Ward. Campbell, I corrected sharply. I kept my name. He waved a hand dismissively. Ms. Campbell, without a written contract stating he couldn't use the funds for specific purposes. And considering you are legally married, this isn't a crime. It is a marital dispute. It is civil. You need a divorce lawyer, not a detective. His father threatened me, I pressed, leaning forward. Leonard Ward? He told me if I came here, his brother who works in this building would make sure it went away. Miller's expression hardened instantly. The boredom vanished, replaced by a defensive wall of blue silence. Sergeant Ward is a respected officer. I would be very careful about making accusations of corruption without proof. Ms. Campbell, that could be considered filing a false report. The air left the room. I looked at the badge on his chest, then at the closed door behind him. Leonard had been right. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was designed to protect the people who built it. I see, I whispered. I gathered my papers, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Thank you for your time. I walked out of the precinct into the blinding afternoon sun, feeling naked, the shield of the law, which I had always assumed would be there if I was wronged, had just been used to bludgeon me. The next blow came 2 days later in the form of a letter from Riverton Community Bank. I tore open the envelope standing by my mailbox, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Dear Ms. Campbell, regarding your claim of unauthorized activity ending in 9288, After a thorough investigation, we have determined that the transactions in question were made with a valid card and PIN by an authorized user. As such, we cannot honor your request for a chargeback or reimbursement. This matter is considered a civil dispute between account holders. We consider this matter closed. I slid down the wall of the hallway until I hit the floor. Closed. 4 years of saving. 4 years of eating instant ramen and skipping dental appointments. Closed. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. That evening, I sat on my floor with my laptop, trying to figure out how to pay my rent with the $6 left in my checking account. I decided to check my credit report. I needed to know if I could qualify for a small emergency loan, something to keep the lights on while I fought them. I logged into the credit monitoring site. The page loaded, a spinning circle of doom. When the dashboard appeared, I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat simply closed up. My credit score, usually a pristine 750, had plummeted to 580. I clicked on the Open Accounts tab, my vision blurring. There were 2 new credit cards listed, one from Amex, one from Chase, both opened 3 weeks ago, both maxed out with a combined balance of $8,000, and below them, a line item that made the room spin. Summit Crest Lending, personal loan, $25,000. I clicked on the details. The loan had been taken out a month ago. The funds had been dispersed to an account I didn't recognize. The status was already listed as past due. I managed to download the original loan application document, my fingers feeling numb, like they belonged to a corpse. I zoomed in on the signature block at the bottom. There was my name, Lucy Campbell, but the handwriting wasn't mine. The L was swept up in a flamboyant, arrogant loop, and the C was sharp and jagged. It was Leonard's handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards and checks for 3 years. He hadn't even tried hard to disguise it. He had just signed my name with his own hand, confident that I would be too crushed or too scared to notice. They hadn't just stolen my savings. They had buried me in $33,000 of debt. They had stolen my past and my future. I closed the laptop, feeling a wave of nausea so strong I had to rush to the bathroom. I dry heaved over the toilet for 10 minutes, but there was nothing in my stomach to bring up. The next morning, my phone pinged with an email. It was from David, the owner of FableGrid Studio, my boss, my mentor, the man who had told me I had the best eye for shadow in the city. Subject pause on upcoming projects. Lucy, I'm writing this with a heavy heart. We have received some concerning reports regarding your current personal challenges. We have been contacted by several clients who expressed hesitation about your involvement in their campaigns due to rumors of volatility. We value your work, but FableGrid relies on the absolute confidence of our client base. Until you get your personal situation stabilized, we are going to have to pause your freelance contracts, effective immediately. We hope you find the help you need. David. I stared at the screen, confused. Reports volatility. Then I saw it. In my spam folder, an email forwarded to me by a sympathetic receptionist at a vendor we worked with. It was from Vivian Ward. Subject prayer request for our beloved daughter-in-law. The email had been sent to the entire New Mercy Outreach donor list, which included half the business owners in Riverton Bay, including FableGrid's biggest clients. Dearest friends, please lift our sweet Lucy up in prayer. She is battling a severe mental health crisis and has become paranoid and unstable. It breaks our hearts to see her this way, lashing out at those who love her most. We are doing everything we can to get her into treatment, but until then, we ask for your patience and grace if you encounter her. She is not herself. It was a masterpiece of destruction, with one loving email. Vivian had nuked my professional reputation. She had painted me as crazy so that when I started screaming about the theft, everyone would just nod and say, "Ah, yes, Vivian asked us to pray for her." I was radioactive. 2 days later, the eviction notice was taped to my door. It was a bright orange piece of paper, humiliatingly bright. Notice to pay rent or quit. I had 10 days to come up with $1,200. I had less than $10 in my pocket. My refrigerator contained half a jar of pickles and a bottle of mustard. My cabinets were empty. Friday morning arrived with a gray, oppressive drizzle. I walked the 12 blocks to the 5th Street Haven. I didn't wear my volunteer lanyard. I didn't bring my cheerful, "how can I help" smile. I wore my hood up. I clutched my camera bag to my chest, not because I was working, but because it was the only thing I owned that the wards hadn't figured out how to liquidate yet. If I sold it, I could eat for a month, but I would lose my eye. I would lose the only thing that made me Lucy. I stood in the line I had photographed 100 times, the line I had described in captions as a testament to resilience. Standing in it didn't feel resilient. It felt like dying. I shuffled forward, keeping my head down. When I reached the serving table, I couldn't look at the volunteer. I just held out my tray. The soup splashed into the bowl. I found a seat in the far back corner, shrinking into myself. I took a bite. It was warm. I hadn't eaten a hot meal in 48 hours. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. I blinked them back furiously. I refused to cry here. "You are on the wrong side of the lens today." I looked up. The Friday man was there. He was wearing the same frayed black coat, his gray hair damp from the rain. He set his tray down opposite me and sat with that same deliberate, regal slowness. "I lost," I whispered. My voice was raspy. "They took everything. The bank, the police, my job. My apartment is next." He broke his bread, dipping it into the broth. He didn't look surprised. "The system is designed to protect capital, not people. You are surprised because you thought you were playing a fair game. You were never playing a fair game." "They forged my signature," I said, the horror of it bubbling up again. "A $25,000 loan. And my mother-in-law told the whole city I am crazy so no one will hire me." "Standard operating procedure," he said calmly. "Isolate the victim, cut off the resources, destroy credibility. It is the domestic abuse playbook, but executed with a corporate strategy." He reached into his pocket. I flinched, expecting, I didn't know what. A weapon. He pulled out a small plastic card, a monthly bus pass for the Riverton Transit Authority. He slid it across the chipped table. "Take it," he said. "I can't," I said automatically. "I am not." "You are." He cut me off. His eyes locked onto mine, gray and unyielding. "You are hungry. You are broke. You are about to be homeless. Drop the pride. Pride is a luxury for people with bank accounts." I stared at the bus pass. It was worth $70. It meant I could get around the city to find work. It meant I didn't have to walk in the rain. I reached out and took it. My hand was shaking. "What do I do?" I asked. "The police won't listen. The bank won't listen. I am nobody." The Friday man leaned forward. For the first time, his face softened. Just a fraction. "Stop begging them to believe you," he hissed, his voice low and intense. "You are running around screaming, 'I am innocent' to people who do not care about innocence. They care about liability. They care about documentation." He pointed a gnarled finger at my camera bag. "You have eyes. You have skills. Stop acting like a victim and start acting like a coroner. They killed your life." "Fine. Perform the autopsy." "How?" "Let the papers speak," he said. "Stop using your mouth. Use the records. Every thief leaves a trail. Arrogant thieves leave highways." He stood up, wiping crumbs from his coat. "Next week, bring me something other than tears. Bring me a fact." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd of wet coats and tired faces. I sat there, clutching the bus pass, from across the room. By the kitchen entrance, I saw Denise, the director. She was looking at me. She wasn't smiling. She looked from the camera bag on my lap to the soup bowl in front of me. Her expression broke. It was a look of profound, sorrowful recognition. She knew. The volunteer was now the case study. I couldn't handle her pity. I stood up, slinging my bag over my shoulder, and walked out into the rain. But something had changed. The Friday man's words were rattling around in my empty stomach. Perform the autopsy. I walked back to my apartment. It was dark. I hadn't turned the lights on to save electricity. though the eviction notice glowed faintly orange in the hallway light. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. The battery was at 40%. I didn't open my email. I didn't open the job search sites. I opened a blank Excel spreadsheet. The cursor blinked against the stark white grid. It looked like a snowfield. Cold, indifferent, waiting. I typed the file name. Case LC. They think I'll break. I hit enter. Then, in the first cell, column A, row 1, I typed the date of the first transaction. January 15th. Riverton Community Bank. Authorization added. I wasn't Lucy the victim anymore. I was Lucy the investigator, and I was going to build a map of my own murder, one cell at a time. I did not call my mother. I did not call a therapist. I sat on the floor of my dark apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen, and I realized that I did not need comfort. Comfort was a warm blanket, and blankets were useless in a knife fight. I needed a weapon. I picked up my phone and dialed Jade Rivera. Jade and I had gone to college together, but while I was in the darkroom inhaling developer chemicals, Jade was in the computer lab building predictive models for market crashes. She now worked as a senior data analyst for Pulse Mosaic Analytics, a firm that predicted consumer behavior for Fortune 500 companies. Jade did not have a shoulder to cry on. She had a spine made of titanium and a brain that processed tragedy as a dataset. Rivera, she answered on the first ring. No hello. It is Lucy, I said. My voice was steady, lacking the tremor that had been there at the police station. They stole everything. Jade, the studio fund, my credit rating, my reputation. It is all gone. I expected a gasp. I expected, oh my God, are you okay? Instead, I heard the clicking of a mechanical keyboard. How much? She asked. $14,000 in cash, $25,000 in fraudulent loans, $8,000 in credit card debt. Duration of the theft. The account drain was instant. The loans were over the last month. The credit cards were 3 weeks ago. Are you safe physically? Yes. Good, Jade said. Stop crying. Tears distort the data. Pack your laptop, your bank statements, and that high-resolution camera of yours. Come to my place. We are setting up a war room tonight. 30 minutes later, I was standing in Jade's apartment. It was the opposite of the Ward estate, where their home was cluttered with expensive performative trinkets. Jade's place was a shrine to minimalism. White walls, black furniture, and 3 massive monitors glowing on a desk that cost more than my car. Coffee is brewing, Jade said, pointing to the living room wall. Move the sofa. That is our canvas. We spent the next hour in a frenzy of activity that felt less like friendship and more like tactical warfare. We taped every piece of paper I had to the wall. The bank statements showing the drain, the loan documents from Summit Crest Lending with the forged signature, the eviction notice, the email from FableGrid firing me, the prayer request from Vivian painting me as unstable. It looked like the wall of a serial killer, or the detective hunting him. Okay, Jade said, cracking her knuckles. She opened a fresh Google sheet on her main monitor. We need to digitize this. You are the photographer. Shoot every document. High contrast. I want to be able to zoom in on the pixels of that signature. I did as I was told. The shutter of my Canon clicked rhythmically. A mechanical heartbeat in the quiet room. Click, the loan application. Click, the transfer to Ward Legacy Consulting. We are going to code this, Jade said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. We are not using names. Names carry emotion. We are using identifiers. You are subject 0. Leonard is target alpha. Vivian is target beta. Ethan is, let's call him proxy 1. She set up columns. Date, amount, source, destination, signatory, method. Now, Jade said, turning to face the wall. We start entering every penny, every date. As we worked, the pattern began to emerge from the noise. It wasn't just a robbery. It was a siphon. Look at this, Jade said, pointing to the spreadsheet. The $25,000 loan was deposited into your account on the 4th. It was transferred out on the 5th to Ward Legacy Consulting. On the 6th, Ward Legacy transferred $20,000 to New Mercy Outreach. The charity, I frowned. Why would they move it to the charity that makes it public money? Watch, Jade said. On the 10th, New Mercy Outreach paid $20,000 to Northbridge Consulting LLC for strategic planning services. Northbridge, I whispered. I saw that name on a piece of mail at their house once. Leonard said it was just a holding company for the estate. It is a washing machine, Jade corrected. They took the loan in your name, washed it through the family business, washed it again through the charity to make it look like an expense, and dumped it into a shell company that only they control, to the IRS. New Mercy just paid a vendor, to the bank. You just gave money to your in-laws. But in reality, Leonard just bought himself a tax-free bonus. I stared at the screen. It was brilliant. It was evil. We need more data points, Jade said, leaning back. A pattern of 1 is an anomaly. A pattern of 2 is a coincidence. A pattern of 3 is a case. Who else have they touched? I thought about the family dinners, the way Vivian would corner relatives in the kitchen, whispering about cash flow issues and God's timing. My cousin Logan, I said. He is a graphic designer, just out of school. He mentioned something at Christmas about Vivian borrowing money for a medical bill. Call him, Jade commanded. Put it on speaker. I dialed Logan. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding tired. Hey, Lucy, I heard, well, Aunt Vivian sent an email. Are you okay? She said you were having episodes. I am not having episodes. Logan, I said, my voice hard. I am looking at a spreadsheet that says, Leonard stole $25,000 from me. Did they borrow money from you? There was a long silence on the other end. $4,000, Logan said, his voice small. Last year, Aunt Vivian called me crying. She said Uncle Leonard had a heart arrhythmia, and their insurance was fighting the claim. She said they needed cash for a specialist or he might die. Jade's eyes widened. She typed furiously. Target Beta, Method Medical Guilt Trip, amount 4,000. Did they pay you back? I asked. No, Logan scoffed. When I asked for it back 3 months later because I needed to fix my car, Vivian got cold. She told me I was being ungrateful after all the dinners they had hosted. She said, We are family. Logan, not a bank. They made me feel like I was the greedy one. Send me the transaction record. Logan, I said. Right now. Lucy, what are you doing? I am building a map, I said. And you are on it. We hung up. Jade looked at me, her expression grim. Medical emergency, classic, high urgency, high emotional leverage, low verification. Who else? I don't know, I said, rubbing my temples. They know so many people. Jade stood up and walked to the wall where we had taped the prayer request email. She tapped the paper. This isn't just a smear campaign. Lucy, this is a contact list. She pointed to the tow field. Vivian, in her arrogance or carelessness, hadn't used the blind carbon copy function. She had CC'd every single person on her donor list. There are 50 emails here, Jade said. Local business owners, distant relatives, neighbors, people from their church. We can't just email them and ask if they were scammed, I said. Vivian already told them I'm crazy. We don't ask, Jade said. We offer a safe harbor. She opened a new tab. We are setting up a secure group on an encrypted platform. We will call it Ledger 5th Street. We invite them anonymously first. We say, if you have noticed financial irregularities regarding New Mercy Outreach or the Ward family, you are not alone. Share your story here. Secure, encrypted. We sent the invites. It was a gamble. For the first hour, nothing happened. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then, at 10:30 at night, the first ping came through. It was from a woman named Martha, a great-aunt on my mother's side who lived in Florida. Message. They told me they were starting a scholarship fund for homeless teens. I sent $5,000 2 years ago, every time I ask for a photo of the recipient. Vivian stops replying. Jade entered the data. Target beta. Method fake charity project. Amount 5,000. Then another ping, this one from a neighbor of the ward's, an elderly man named Mr. Shah Henderson. Message: Leonard told me the roof of the homeless shelter had collapsed. He showed me pictures of a destroyed roof. I wrote a check for $10,000 for emergency repairs. Later, I drove by the shelter. The roof was fine. Leonard said they fixed it under budget and used the rest for administration. Jade typed. Target Alpha. Method emergency repair scam. Amount 10,000. Look at the dates, Jade said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She highlighted the rows on the spreadsheet. Martha's check, June 10th. Mr. Henderson's check, June 12th. My account drained Tuesday. What happens in late June? Jade asked. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Their annual mission trip, I said. New Mercy Outreach goes to the Caribbean every summer to scout locations for orphanages. Jade pulled up the public records for Northbridge Consulting LLC. And look at this. Northbridge always pays a consulting fee to a bank in the Cayman Islands in July. The pattern was stark and undeniable. They would ramp up the frantic fundraising, the medical emergencies, the roof collapses, the sudden need for bridge capital right before their trip. They would suck the family and community dry, funnel the money into the charity to get the tax deduction, move it to the shell company, and then ship it offshore while they sipped cocktails on a beach, claiming they were doing the Lord's work. It is a cycle, Jade said, a seasonal harvest of their own friends and family. My phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen. It is Denise, I said. From the soup kitchen. I had added Denise to the list on a hunch. She accepted the invite immediately. Message: is this real? Because if it is, I have a file cabinet I have been wanting to open for years. I type back, it is Lucy, the photographer. Tell us everything. Denise's response came in paragraphs. 3 years ago, Leonard Ward promised Fifth Street Haven a grant of $50,000. He had a giant novelty check made. He had you take pictures of him handing it to me. The next day, he told me the funds were delayed due to processing. Then he started demanding to see our internal audits. He said our overhead was too high and that he didn't trust my management style. He never sent the check, but I saw that photo in their annual report listed under disbursed grants. He claimed the deduction. We never got a dime. Fraud, Jade said, slamming her hand on the desk. That is straight tax fraud, claiming a donation that was never made. We worked through the night. By 3 a.m, the wall was no longer just a collection of sad stories. It was a flowchart of criminal enterprise. We had identified over $70,000 in theft from family members alone. Another $100,000 in dubious charity discrepancies. The coffee pot was empty. My eyes were burning, but the fear that had been paralyzing me for days was gone. It had been replaced by the cold, hard clarity of the data. I stood back and looked at the wall. We had connected strings of red yarn from the victims to the shell company. It looked like a bloody nervous system. This isn't a family dispute, Jade said softly, standing beside me. Her voice was filled with a dark kind of awe. Lucy, you have been crying because you thought your husband was bad with money. You thought your in-laws were just greedy. She turned to me, her face illuminated by the blue light of the monitors. This is a structured criminal organization. Leonard isn't a philanthropist. He is a predator who uses a nonprofit status as a hunting license. She pointed to the column labeled IRS Red Flags. It was entirely red. IRS Criminal Investigation Division doesn't care about family drama, Jade said. They don't care about broken hearts, but they care about tax evasion. They care about money laundering. And based on this wall, Leonard Ward hasn't just cheated you. He has cheated the federal government out of taxes on nearly $250,000 in the last 3 years. I looked at the name at the top of the spreadsheet, Ward Legacy Consulting. They called me unstable, I whispered. They said no one would believe me. Jade smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. That is why we are not going to tell them a story. We are going to hand them a math problem, and there is no crying in math. She hit save on the document. Get some sleep, Lucy, Jade said. Tomorrow, we are calling in a specialist. If we are going to perform an autopsy, we need someone who knows how to handle a scalpel. I lay down on Jade's spare mattress, but I didn't sleep. I watched the blinking light of the server tower. I thought about the Friday man. Paper Beat's mouth. I finally understood what he meant. My tears were just water, but the spreadsheet on that screen, that was concrete. That was iron. And for the first time since I saw my bank account hit zero, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a witness for the prosecution. Jade made the call at 9 in the morning. By 10, Malcolm Price was standing in her living room. I had expected a shark in a suit. Someone slick like the lawyers on TV who spin pens and talk about loopholes. Malcolm was nothing like that. He was 67 years old, wearing a beige cardigan that looked like it smelled of mothballs and old library books. He had thick bifocals hanging around his neck on a chain, and he carried a leather briefcase that was so worn the handle was wrapped in electrical tape. He looked like a retired geography teacher who collected stamps. He didn't say hello. He didn't shake my hand. He walked straight to the wall where Jade and I had spent the last 24 hours taping up the autopsy of my financial life. He stood there for 15 minutes. Silence stretched in the room, heavy and uncomfortable. I shifted my weight, about to speak, but Jade shot me a look that said, "Do not move." Malcolm hummed occasionally, a low, dissonant sound, as he peered closely at the forged loan application, and then stepped back to look at the flow of funds into the shell company. Finally, he turned around. He took off his glasses and wiped them on his cardigan. "Well," Malcolm said, his voice dry as sandpaper, "what we have here is a church mafia, a cheap one, but very greedy." He walked over to the kitchen island and opened his briefcase. He didn't pull out a laptop. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and a fountain pen. "You are looking at this like a victim," Malcolm said to me, uncapping the pen. "You see betrayal. You see a husband who lied and a mother-in-law who is mean. That is boring. The law does not care about mean people. The law cares about math." He pointed the pen at the wall. New Mercy Outreach is the face. It smiles. It asks for money. It holds galas. It is tax-exempt because it claims to do God's work. Northbridge Consulting LLC is the stomach. It eats everything the face brings in, and your in-laws, they are the parasites living in the stomach. "We know they are stealing," I said, "but the police called it a civil matter." "The police are overworked and underpaid," Malcolm said dismissively. "They see a husband and wife fighting over a credit card. They see paperwork. They hate paperwork. We are not going to give them a dispute. We are going to give them a felony. Jade, pull up the public tax filings for New Mercy from last year." Jade's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Got it. Form 990. Total revenue, $450,000. Jade read. Total charitable disbursements, $80,000. Jade said. Mostly to program expenses and consulting fees. Malcolm laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. 80,000. So where did the rest go, I will tell you. It went to lifestyle maintenance. He started drawing a chart on his legal pad. He drew a line down the middle. On the left, we have what they tell the IRS. Malcolm explained. Based on the charity's filings and Leonard's likely personal returns, he is probably claiming a taxable income of nearly zero. Maybe he even claims a loss. He paints a picture of a humble servant of the community, barely scraping by. On the right, Malcolm continued, his pen scratching loudly. We have reality. This is the net worth method. It is how they caught Capone. It is how they catch everyone who gets too arrogant. He looked at me. You said he wears a Breitling. Yes, I said. And he drives a new Mercedes SUV, leased. I think. Put it on the board, Malcolm commanded. We spent the next 3 hours building a different kind of wall. Malcolm forced me to recall every detail of their spending, The wine, the crystal glasses, the trips to Florida, the deposit on the condo Leonard had bragged about at Thanksgiving. "Here is the trap," Malcolm said, circling a number at the bottom of the page. To afford the lease on the Mercedes, the mortgage in Westbrook Hills, the country club dues, and the condo in Florida, Leonard Ward needs a net monthly income of at least $18,000, post-tax. He tapped the tax return Jade had pulled up. But here, he claims his salary from the charity is only $30,000 a year. That is $2,500 a month. So where does the other $15,500 come from? I asked. Exactly, Malcolm smiled, showing teeth that were slightly yellowed. That is the gap. That is the lie. If it is a gift, there is a tax. If it is income, there is a tax. If it is a loan, there is paperwork. If he cannot explain where that money comes from, the IRS assumes it is illegal income, and they tax it, and then they put you in handcuffs for hiding it. My head was spinning. So we don't sue him for stealing my money. No, Malcolm said. That is small claims. That is messy. We package this up. We show the discrepancy. We hand it to the people who have the power to freeze assets without asking politely. He waved a hand at me. Take a break. You look like you're going to pass out. Go get some food. Jade and I need to crunch the credit card interest rates. I didn't want to leave, but my stomach was growling loud enough to be heard over the typing. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the late afternoon air. I didn't go to a restaurant. I didn't have money for a restaurant. I walked automatically, my feet knowing the route before my brain caught up. It was Friday. I arrived at the 5th Street Haven just as the evening shift was starting. The line was shorter than in the mornings. Mostly the regulars who slept at the shelter. I walked in, not as a volunteer, not really as a guest, but as something in between. I got a bowl of vegetable soup and a piece of bread. I sat at the corner table. The Friday man was there. Of course he was. He was drinking tea from a styrofoam cup, his black coat buttoned up to his chin. He watched me sit down. He didn't say hello. "You look different," he said. "I am tired," I said, dipping my bread into the broth. "No," he shook his head. "Last week, you looked like a deer in headlights. Today, you look like a hunter who lost her rifle but found a rock." I let out a tired chuckle. "I found a consultant. He is an ex-fraud investigator. He is tearing apart their tax returns." The Friday man nodded slowly. "Good. You stopped screaming." "I am still angry," I confessed. "I want to scream. I want to go to their house and shake them. I want to ask them how they could do this to me. I was their daughter-in-law. I baked them birthday cakes." "And that is why you would lose," the Friday man said. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You are looking for closure. You are looking for them to admit they were wrong. Narcissists do not admit they are wrong. They rewrite history to make themselves the heroes." "So what do I do with the anger?" I asked. "You turn it into cold storage," he said. "I used to work as an accountant for a factory. Years ago, I saw men lose fingers in the machines because the owners wanted to save money on safety guards. The men who yelled got fired. The men who wrote down the serial numbers of the faulty parts and sent them to the safety inspector, they got the factory shut down." I looked at him. He spoke with a precision that didn't fit the frayed cuffs of his coat. "An accountant?" I asked. "You talk like a lawyer." He smiled, a cryptic shifting of wrinkles around his eyes. "I read a lot. The library is free, and I've had a long life to learn how the world works." He took a sip of his tea. "They can play the game of tears," he said. "They can cry to the police. They can cry to the church. But do not let them touch the tax system. At the IRS, crying buys you nothing. The tax man is the only priest who offers no forgiveness." "That is what Malcolm said," I murmured. "He said the law cares about math." "He is a smart man," the Friday man said. "Listen to him, and remember this when you hold the paper. You do not need to raise your voice. Let the silence of the numbers be the loudest thing in the room." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped peppermint candy. He slid it across the table to me. Dessert, he said. Keep your blood sugar up. Wars are long. I took the candy. Thank you. Go back to your war room, he said, shooing me away. And tell your friend to check the property records in Florida. People like that always put the assets in a trust, but they usually forget to hide the beneficiary. I froze. How did you know about Florida? He didn't blink. People who steal in winter always dream of summer. It is human nature. I walked back to Jade's apartment with a strange energy buzzing in my veins. The Friday man was right. I had been trying to win a moral argument with immoral people. When I got back, Malcolm had covered another wall in yellow sticky notes. He looked energized, his eyes gleaming behind his bifocals. You are back, Malcolm said. Good. Look at this. He pointed to a cluster of notes labeled Shell Game. We found the link, Jade said, swiveling her chair. Malcolm was right about the lifestyle gap, but we found something better. The consulting fees New Mercy pays to Northbridge. They are identical to the mortgage payments on the Westbrook Hills house, plus a 15% markup. They are paying their mortgage with charity money, I said, directly, and deducting it as a business expense, Malcolm added. That is tax evasion, embezzlement, and charity fraud. That is the trifecta. That is 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Malcolm capped his pen. He looked at the wall, then at me. We are not going to confront them, Malcolm said. We are not going to send a demand letter. That gives them time to shred documents. We are going to package this entire wall into a nice, neat PDF, and we are going to hand-deliver it to 3 people. Who? I asked. The special agent in charge at the IRS Criminal Investigation Field Office. Malcolm counted on his fingers. The State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, and the Financial Crimes Unit of the Riverton Police, but not your brother-in-law's precinct. We go to the state level. What about the money they stole from me? I asked. The $25,000. That becomes evidence, Malcolm said. Once the feds freeze their assets, you become a creditor, you get in line, but more importantly, once the indictment drops, the bank will realize the loan was fraudulent. They will clear your debt to avoid liability. He started packing his legal pads back into his battered briefcase. We are calling this Project Soup Line, Malcolm said, writing the name on the corner of the wall in sharp black marker, because that is where they put you, and that is where you are going to bury them. He walked to the door, then paused. He turned back to me, his expression serious. One rule, Lucy. From this moment on, you do not speak to them. If they call, you let it ring. If they text, you do not reply. Every time you feel the urge to send them a nasty message or ask them why, I want you to pick up a piece of paper that proves they are lying and scan it. Scan it, I repeated. Digital is forever, Malcolm said, opening the door. Paper beats mouth, but a PDF beats everything. He left. I stood there with Jade, looking at Project Soup Line. The tangled mess of my life had been reorganized into columns and rows. It wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was an indictment. I reached into my pocket and fingered the peppermint candy the Friday man had given me. I unwrapped it and popped it into my mouth. It tasted sharp and cool. I took my phone out. There were 3 missed calls from Ethan, a text message from Vivian. We are worried about you. Please come home. We can work this out. I felt the old urge to reply, to scream, to defend myself. Instead, I walked over to the scanner. I picked up the forged loan application from Summit Crest Lending. I placed it on the glass bed. I pressed the button. The machine whirred. A bright light scanned across the document, capturing every jagged line of the forgery. Scan complete. I didn't reply to Vivian. I just saved the file. Silence, I discovered, was a far more aggressive weapon than screaming. For 3 weeks, I had vanished. I did not answer the 47 text messages Ethan sent, ranging from angry demands to pathetic pleading. I did not return the voicemails from Leonard, which sounded increasingly like legal threats wrapped in corporate jargon. I did not open the door when my cousin-in-law banged on it for 10 minutes. I simply sat in Jade's apartment, fed data into our war room wall, and let them stew in the juices of their own paranoia. They were used to the Lucy who apologized, the Lucy who wanted everyone to get along, the Lucy who would do anything to avoid being the cause of tension. My silence was a variable they couldn't plug into their equation, and it was driving them insane. Then, the email arrived. It appeared in my inbox on a Tuesday morning, contrasting sharply with the cold, hard spreadsheets I'd been staring at. The subject line was simply, "Healing. My dearest Lucy, my heart is absolutely shattered. The silence between us is a weight I can no longer bear." I know things were said. I know feelings were hurt. We are a family, and families fight. But they also forgive. I have been praying on this for days, and God has put it on my heart to reach out. Please, no lawyers, no husbands, no anger. Just you and me, mother to daughter, having coffee. Let us clear the air. I want to understand your pain so we can move past this ugly chapter. Meet me at the Roasted Bean on 4th Street tomorrow at 10. I will be waiting. Love, Mom. I read it aloud to the room. Malcolm was sitting in the armchair, peeling an orange. He didn't even look up. "It is a fishing expedition," he said, dropping a piece of rind onto a napkin. "She does not want to heal. She wants to know how much you know. They are scared. The silence is making them imagine the worst. So she is coming to inspect the damage." "So I don't go," I said, reaching to delete the email. "No," Malcolm said, stopping my hand with a sharp gesture. "You go, but you do not go as Lucy the victim. You go as Lucy the operative." He reached into his battered briefcase and pulled out a small, black device. It looked like a USB drive, but slightly thicker. "Riverton is in a one-party consent state," Malcolm said, holding the device up to the light. "That means as long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without telling the other person. It is perfectly legal, and it is admissible in court." He tossed it to me. I caught it. It felt heavy for its size. "Clip that inside your jacket," he instructed. "The microphone is sensitive enough to pick up a whisper across a table. She is going to try to get you to admit to being unstable. She wants you to say something she can use to discredit you later. We are going to flip the script." "How?" I asked, my stomach already tightening at the thought of seeing her. "You are going to play the part she wrote for you," Malcolm said, his eyes gleaming behind his spectacles. "You are going to be tired. You are going to be confused. You are going to apologize for overreacting. You are going to lull her into a false sense of security. And then, when she thinks she has you back on the leash, you are going to drop a crumb." "What crumb?" "The offshore account," Malcolm said, "and the IRS." The next morning, I sat in my car 2 blocks away from the Roasted Bean. I checked the recorder 3 times. It was clipped securely to the inside pocket of my denim jacket, the small red light covered with a piece of black tape just in case. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I hadn't worn makeup. I had pulled my hair back into a messy bun. I wore an old sweater that looked slightly too big. I needed to look like the woman Vivian described in her prayer emails: fragile, breaking, and in need of guidance. I took a deep breath, channeling the nausea I felt into my performance. I am sad. I told myself, I am just a confused girl who misses her family. I walked into the coffee shop. It was a trendy, sun-drenched place with exposed brick walls and the smell of expensive roasted beans, the kind of place the Wards loved because it felt authentic without actually being gritty. Vivian was already there. She had chosen a table in the corner, secluded enough for privacy, but visible enough to be seen being benevolent. She was wearing a soft gray cashmere sweater and minimal makeup. Her eyes looked artfully puffy, as if she had been crying all morning. It was a masterclass in optics. When she saw me, she stood up immediately. She didn't wave. She reached out with both hands, her face crumbling into a mask of relief and sorrow. "Lucy," she breathed. She pulled me into a hug. I felt her expensive perfume fill my nose, Chanel and guilt. My body went rigid, every instinct screaming at me to push her away. But I forced myself to go limp. I let her hold me. "Oh, you look so tired," she whispered into my ear, her hand stroking my back, You have lost weight, my poor girl. We sat down. She kept hold of my hand across the table, her grip tight, trapping me. I ordered you a chamomile tea, she said softly. It is good for the nerves. I know you have been struggling. I have, I said, keeping my voice low and shaky. I stared at the tea. It has been really hard month. Vivian, I don't know what happened. Vivian sighed, a sound of infinite patience. We know. Honey, we know. Ethan told us about the stress you have been under at the studio, the pressure to open your own place. It can do things to a person's mind. It can make you see enemies where there are only people who love you. She squeezed my hand. That day at the house, when you were shouting, that wasn't you, Lucy. That was the stress talking. We forgive you. We really do. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I just wanted to open the studio, I whined softly. And when the money was gone, I panicked. I felt like I was drowning. Of course you did, Vivian cooed. And that is why we had to step in. We borrowed that money to protect it, in a way, to invest it in something bigger, so we could all benefit later. But your mind twisted it into something ugly. That is what mental exhaustion does. It makes you paranoid. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Listen to me. Lucy, Ethan misses you. We miss you. Come home. We can get you the help you need. We know a wonderful therapist at the Grace Center. We will pay for everything. You just need to rest. Stop fighting. Stop listening to these toxic influences who are telling you to attack your family. She meant Jade. She meant Malcolm. She meant anyone who told me the truth. I took a sip of the tea. It tasted like hot water and deception. It was time. I want to stop fighting, I said, looking up at her with wide, watery eyes. I really do. I am so tired of the spreadsheets. I am tired of the mail. Vivian froze, just for a microsecond. The mail. Yes, I said, rubbing my forehead as if I had a headache. That is actually why I haven't come home. I was scared. I got this letter. It was confusing. I think it was from the government. Vivian's grip on my hand tightened. Her nails dug into my skin. What kind of letter? Lucy. It was from the IRS. I lied. Or maybe it was a notification about an audit. It was addressed to Northbridge Consulting. But it came to my old apartment address because I think my name was listed on a loan document somewhere. I don't understand it. Vivian's face went still. The sorrowful mother mask didn't slip. It evaporated. Beneath it was something sharp, cold, and reptilian. What did the letter say? She asked. Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was a command. It mentioned something about a discrepancy, I said, rambling slightly, playing the fool. Something about a transfer to a bank in the Cayman Islands and a compliance review for foreign assets. I was going to bring it to a lawyer because I was scared I might go to jail. But no, Vivian hissed. She jerked forward, knocking her spoon onto the floor with a loud clang. She didn't even look at it. You do not take that to a lawyer, she said, her voice a low, venomous rattle. Do you hear me? You do not show that to anyone. But if the IRS is looking at the Northbridge account, I trailed off, letting the sentence hang. There is no Northbridge account that concerns you, Vivian snapped. Her eyes darted around the coffee shop to see if anyone was listening, then fixed back on me with terrifying intensity. Who showed you those papers? Did you break into Leonard's office? That is a felony. Lucy, accessing private corporate records is a federal crime. I didn't break in, I stammered. I told you. I just saw the notification. It said the funds from the Summit Crest loan, the one with my name, were moved offshore. I just want to know if I am in trouble. Vivian, if that money is in the Caymans, do I have to pay taxes on it? She leaned across the table. Her face was inches from mine. I could see the heavy foundations settling into the lines around her mouth. You listen to me, you stupid girl, she whispered. You don't know what you're talking about. That offshore arrangement is for asset protection. It is standard. It is none of your business. If you go to the IRS, if you hand them any papers, you are not just hurting us. You are destroying the charity. You are destroying God's work. Do you want that on your conscience? But the signature, I whispered. Forget the signature, she hissed. We did what was necessary to keep the family afloat. Leonard handles the tax structuring. It is complicated. It is beyond your little photographer brain. If you mention the Caymans to anyone, I swear to God, Lucy, I will make sure you are committed to a psych ward before the sun goes down. I will tell them you are delusional. I will have Ethan sign the papers. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought the microphone would pick it up. She had done it. She had admitted to the offshore account. She had admitted to the structuring. She had admitted that Leonard handled it, and she had threatened me to keep it quiet. It was consciousness of guilt. It was the smoking gun. I pulled my hand away from hers. I let the confused girl act drop. Just a fraction. I have to go, I said, standing up. I don't feel well. Sit down, Vivian ordered. We are not finished. I think we are, I said. I grabbed my bag. I need to go lie down. You are right. Vivian, I am exhausted. Lucy, she barked, loud enough that heads turned at the nearby tables. She realized her mistake instantly and lowered her voice, but the venom remained. If you walk out that door, do not bother coming back. We will cut you off completely. You already did, I said softly. I turned and walked out. I didn't run, though my legs felt like jelly. I walked through the heavy glass door, onto the sidewalk, and turned the corner. As soon as I was out of sight of the coffee shop, I leaned against the brick wall of a drugstore and dry heaved. The adrenaline crash was brutal. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unzip my jacket. I fumbled for the recorder. I pulled it out. The red light was still blinking, steady and calm. I pressed stop. I plugged the device into my phone using the adapter Malcolm had given me. I attached the file to an encrypted message. To Jade Rivera, Malcolm Price. Subject: the coffee date. Message: she admitted the Caymans. She admitted the structuring. She threatened to commit me if I went to the IRS. It is all there. I hit send. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air of Riverton Bay. I felt dirty, coated in the slime of her manipulation, but I also felt something else. I felt powerful. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jade. Get to the apartment, now. I drove back to Jade's place, my eyes checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, paranoid that Leonard's black SUV might be following me. When I burst into the apartment, Jade and Malcolm were standing in front of the screens. The mood in the room was electric. You got it, Malcolm said, actually smiling. That recording is beautiful. Standard asset protection. Asset protection is what rich people call tax evasion when they are trying to sound smart. But that is not the best part. What is? I asked, dropping my bag. Jade pointed to the monitor on the left. It was displaying the real-time alerts she had set up for the Ward family's financial movements. You spooked them, Jade said. You mentioned the IRS and the Caymans, and Vivian must have called Leonard the second you left the table. Look at this. She tapped a graph that showed a sudden, sharp spike. 12 minutes ago, Jade narrated. Leonard Ward logged into his monitored brokerage account. He initiated an emergency withdrawal from his IRA, $50,000. He didn't wait for the 3-day clearing period. He paid the rush fee to wire it out immediately. Where did he send it? I asked. To a holding account at a bank in Miami. Jade said, a bank known for having very loose controls on international transfers. He is liquidating, Malcolm said. He thinks the freeze is coming, so he is trying to move cash to a place he can access it if he has to run. And that is not all, Jade said. She switched tabs to a luxury consignment website called The Gilded Vault. There, listed just 20 minutes ago, was a familiar object, Breitling Navitimer chronograph, mint condition. Box and papers included, urgent sale. Price $4,200. The seller's username was VWW Luxury. "She is selling the watch," I whispered. "The watch he bought with my studio money." "She is selling everything that isn't nailed down," Malcolm said. "They are cashing out. They are getting ready to run." "Does this mean we win?" I asked. "No," Malcolm said, his face hardening. "It means the clock just started ticking. We have hours, not days. If that money hits Miami and jumps to the Caribbean, it is gone forever. We need to lock them down now." He picked up the flash drive containing my recording and the PDF of the investigation. "I am going to the State Attorney General's office," Malcolm said. "Jade, send the packet to Detective Monroe at the Riverton PD Financial Crimes Unit. Tell her we have flight risk indicators." He looked at me. "You," he said, "you stay here. You do not go home. If they are desperate enough to liquidate their retirement accounts and sell their jewelry in a panic, they are desperate enough to come looking for the person who caused it." I looked at the screen, at the image of the watch for sale. It looked so small, just a piece of metal and glass. But it was the pivot point. They had traded my future for that watch, and now they were selling it for pennies on the dollar to save their own skins. "Do it," I said. "Burn it all down." Malcolm nodded and walked out the door. I sat down in the chair he had vacated. I watched the listing for the watch. Views 12. Inquiries 0. I hoped no one bought it. I hoped it sat there, unsold, a symbol of their greed, until the police kicked down their door and took it off Leonard's wrist as evidence. I reached into my pocket and touched the bus pass the Friday man had given me. I wondered if he was eating soup right now. I wondered if he knew that the girl who used to cry in the corner had just wired a bomb to the pillars of the Ward dynasty and lit the fuse. The transformation from victim to prosecutor happened in the quiet hum of Jade's server room. I wasn't Lucy Campbell, the photographer who took pretty pictures of weddings anymore. I was a node in a network of retribution, a processor of evidence. Malcolm Price sat at the kitchen table, his fountain pen scratching across the legal pad like a scalpel cutting through skin. He was finalizing the financial analysis. It wasn't just math. It was a weaponized narrative. "Look at this," Malcolm said, not looking up. They declared a negative income of $5,000 on their personal returns 2 years ago. Yet, in that same fiscal year, they put a down payment of $40,000 on the Florida condo. Unless they found a bag of cash on the sidewalk, that is tax evasion. And the IRS does not believe in bags of cash. Jade and I were compiling the final document. We called it the honor packet. It was 30 pages of lethal juxtapositions. On the left side of the page, we placed the image of a check from a donor intended for homeless youth scholarship. On the right side, we placed the credit card statement from the same week showing a $3,000 charge at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun. We paired the mission trip flyer asking for donations to build wells in Haiti next to the receipt for 3 business-class tickets on Delta Airlines to St. Bart's. "It is undeniable," Jade said, her voice flat. "They aren't even hiding it well. They just assumed no one would ever put the 2 pieces of paper next to each other. That is the arrogance of the mediocre grifter." Malcolm grunted. "They think the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing because they are the only ones clapping." He finished his summary. He didn't email it to a general inbox. He opened his encrypted email client and typed in a specific address. "This goes to my contact at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division." Malcolm said, "Agent Miller. He hates church fraud. He considers it a personal insult." He hit send. Then he forwarded the packet to the State Attorney General's office and the Financial Crimes Unit of the Riverton Police Department. In the subject line, he typed in all caps, "Urgent flight risk, Florida, Caribbean. Ward legacy scheme." "Now," Malcolm said, standing up and buttoning his cardigan. "We go to the police, but not the front desk. We go to the basement." 30 minutes later, we were sitting in a cramped, windowless office in the depths of the Riverton Police Headquarters. The room smelled of stale coffee and ozone. Detective Carla Monroe sat behind a desk buried under stacks of files. She looked tired. the kind of tired that comes from seeing the same scams run by different idiots for 20 years. She flipped through our honor packet with a skeptical expression. "Look," Monroe said, tossing the file onto her desk. "I get it. Your in-laws are scumbags. They stole your savings. That sucks. But I have got actual cartels moving money through laundromats on 8th Street, a family dispute over a charity gala that is a civil matter. Take them to small claims court." "It is not a civil matter," Malcolm said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the USB drive containing the audio recording from the coffee shop. He placed it gently on top of the file. "Detective, on that drive, you will hear Vivian Ward admitting to structuring cash deposits to avoid federal reporting requirements. You will hear her threatening a witness, Ms. Campbell, to keep her from reporting an offshore account in the Cayman Islands." Monroe paused. She looked at the drive, then at Malcolm. "Structuring?" she asked. "And tax evasion on over $200,000 of unreported income," Malcolm added. "The state is not just a spectator here, Detective. The state is a victim. They stole from the tax base." Monroe picked up the file again. This time, she opened it to the page Malcolm had flagged. She looked at the spreadsheet Jade had built, the flow of funds from the charity to the shell company to the personal accounts. 200,000, Monroe muttered. She pulled a calculator out of her drawer. Her fingers moved quickly. Plus the $25,000 fraudulent loan in Ms. Campbell's name, I added, and the identity theft involving my cousin. Monroe stopped typing. She looked at the total on her calculator screen. Her eyes narrowed. "If this flowchart is accurate," Monroe said, her voice changing, shedding the boredom and picking up an edge of professional interest, "then Northbridge Consulting isn't a business. It is a slush fund." "Correct," Malcolm said. "And we have reason to believe they are liquidating. We saw a withdrawal of $50,000 from their retirement accounts this morning, and they are selling assets online." "They are running," Monroe said. She picked up her phone. "If they move that money offshore, we never see it again." She stood up. "I need to call the DA. If we have structuring and flight risk, I can get an emergency freeze order, but I need to move fast." She looked at me. "You are sure about the recording? She admits it." "She admits it," I said. "She told me the offshore account was for asset protection and that I would destroy the family if I told the IRS. "Music to my ears," Monroe said. "Wait here." She left the room. Malcolm leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. And now, we wait for the gears to turn. While we sat in the police station, Jade was back at the apartment, monitoring the digital pulse of the Ward family. She had set up a dashboard that aggregated every public record change, every social media login, every flight booking. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jade. "Alert. New Mercy. Just sent a mass email canceling the mission trip to New Orleans next week, citing unforeseen administrative challenges." Another buzz. "Alert, Northbridge Consulting just initiated a wire transfer request for $80,000 to a bank in Nevis. It is pending bank review." I showed the phone to Malcolm. "They are panic cleaning," Malcolm said. "They know something is wrong. Vivian's conversation with you spooked them more than we thought. They are cutting the lines." Detective Monroe came back in. She looked energized. "The DA is interested," she said, "but he wants the freeze order to be airtight. He doesn't want a judge throwing it out because it looks like a vindictive daughter-in-law." "Do you have the wire transfer request?" Malcolm asked. I held up my phone. $80,000. Attempting to leave the country right now, Monroe snatched the phone from my hand. She looked at the screen, then at the timestamp. "That is it," she said. "That is the exigent circumstance. Attempted dissipation of assets during an active investigation." She grabbed her coat. "I am going to the judge. We are locking the accounts, all of them, personal, business, charity, and I am getting a warrant for the safety deposit boxes." "Why the boxes?" I asked. "Because people who wire $80,000 usually have another $50,000 in cash sitting in a steel box somewhere," Monroe said grimly. "And passports. If they are running, the passports will be in the box." She stopped at the door. You two, go home. Stay off the radar. If they find out the accounts are frozen before we serve the warrant, they might destroy physical evidence. Let the bank give them the bad news. We left the station. The sun was setting over Riverton Bay, turning the gray water into a sheet of copper. I felt a strange vibration in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the hum of a machine I had helped build, finally coming to life. I need to go to 5th Street, I said to Malcolm. Why? Because it started there, I said. And I need to see Denise. Malcolm nodded. Go. I will go back to Jade's and watch the fireworks. I took the bus to the shelter. It was late, and the dinner service was over. Denise was in the back office, counting inventory. When she saw me, she didn't ask how I was. She just waved me in and closed the door. I heard rumors, Denise said, leaning against her desk. Word is that New Mercy canceled their big gala. The vendors are freaking out. It is not a rumor, I said. The police are freezing their accounts tonight. Denise let out a long, slow breath. She looked at a filing cabinet in the corner. Then you need this, she said. She walked over to the cabinet and unlocked the bottom drawer. She pulled out a thick, dusty folder. I kept it, she said. I don't know why. Maybe I knew this day would come. She handed me the folder. I opened it. Inside were letters on New Mercy Outreach letterhead. Dear Denise, we are thrilled to announce a partnership. Dear Denise, regarding the pledged funds, we are experiencing a temporary reallocation, and then, the most damning piece of paper I had ever seen. It was a fundraising brochure from 3 years ago. On the cover was a photo of me, a photo I had taken of the soup kitchen line, but the caption didn't say 5th Street Haven. The caption read, New Mercy's daily bread program feeding over 500 souls a week. They claimed they ran this place, I whispered. They used my kitchen, my food, and your photo to raise money, Denise said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. And they never gave us a single cent. They told donors that New Mercy operated the 5th Street Haven as a subsidiary. I found out when a donor called me asking why the thank you note came from Leonard Ward instead of me. Why didn't you report them? I tried, Denise said. Leonard told the donor I was a disgruntled subcontractor. He threatened to sue the shelter for defamation. We barely have money for carrots. Lucy, we couldn't afford a lawyer. I clutched the folder. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was stolen valor. They had stolen the suffering of the people in this room and sold it for champagne and watches. This goes to Detective Monroe, I said. Tonight? Good, Denise said. Nail them to the wall. I walked out of the office. The main hall was empty, except for the cleaning crew, and him. The Friday man was sitting at his usual table. Even though there was no food, he was reading a newspaper that was 3 days old. I walked over to him. I placed the folder on the table. I did it, I said. The accounts are being frozen. The police are involved. The IRS has the packet. He looked up. His eyes were clear and sharp. And how does it feel? He asked. It feels... I paused, searching for the word. It feels heavy, like I am burying something. You are, he said. You are burying the version of yourself that was afraid. That is a heavy funeral. He looked at the folder. They use the poor to feed the rich, he said quietly. That is the oldest crime in history. But usually, the rich write the laws, so it is not illegal. Not this time, I said. We caught them on the math. The math, he chuckled. The great equalizer. He stood up. He was taller than he looked when he was sitting down. He reached out and patted my shoulder. His hand was heavy and warm. Go home, Lucy. The storm is about to break, and when it does, you need to be standing on dry ground. I left the shelter and took the bus back to Jade's apartment. When I walked in, Jade and Malcolm were standing in front of the monitors. The room was silent. What happened? I asked. Jade pointed to the screen. The dashboard showed a series of red flashing lights next to the bank accounts for Ward Legacy Consulting, New Mercy Outreach, and the personal accounts of Leonard and Vivian Ward. Status restricted. Law enforcement hold. It is done, Jade said. The freeze is active. Every card they have is a piece of plastic. Every check is bouncing. The wire to Nevis was blocked. And look at this, Malcolm said, pointing to a police scanner feed he had running in a separate window. Dispatch Unit 4 Alpha to Westbrook Hills. Service of warrant. Support requested. They are at the house, I asked. No, Malcolm said. That is the backup unit. The primary unit is somewhere else. He switched the feed to the airport tower frequency. Riverton Tower. This is Riverton PD. We have a request to hold departure on a private charter filed for flight plan to Fort Lauderdale. They tried to run, I whispered. They tried, Malcolm said, but paper travels faster than airplanes. I looked at the wall project soup line, the strings, the receipts, the photos. It was a masterpiece of ruin, and for the first time in months, I felt my shoulders drop. The weight was gone. It wasn't my burden anymore. It belonged to the state of New York. I sat down on the floor and closed my eyes. I could imagine the scene at the airport. Vivian in her fur coat. Leonard with his platinum card being declined at the ticket counter. The panic. The realization that the unstable girl with the camera had just checkmated them with a spreadsheet. We keep the receipts, I whispered to the empty room. We always keep the receipts. The air in courtroom 4B smelled of floor wax and desperation. It was a civil hearing to determine if the temporary restraining order on the assets of New Mercy Outreach, Northbridge Consulting, and the Ward family should be extended into a permanent freeze pending the criminal investigation. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Patricia Hale, a overworked legal aid attorney who smelled like stale coffee and had a stack of files so high it acted as a barricade between me and the rest of the room. Across the aisle, the Ward family looked like a deflated balloon. Leonard was wearing a gray suit, but it was not his usual armor. It was wrinkled at the elbows, and his tie was slightly askew. He looked smaller, as if the freezing of his assets had physically shrunk him. Ethan sat next to him, staring at the table, his skin the color of paste. But it was Vivian who shocked me the most. The woman who wouldn't check the mail without full foundation and mascara was barefaced. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun. She looked frantic, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for a ventilation shaft. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who charged $600 an hour, stood up to address Judge Harrison. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice smooth and practiced, "this entire proceeding is a farce. It is the result of a domestic dispute that has spiraled out of control. The plaintiff, Ms. Campbell, is an estranged wife who has been documented by her own family as having mental health struggles. She has fabricated a conspiracy theory out of standard business accounting practices to punish her husband for a marital rough patch." He gestured toward me with a disdainful flick of his wrist. "There is no fraud here, Your Honor. There is only a family trying to do charitable work and a daughter-in-law who has been poisoned by toxic friends. We ask that the freeze be lifted immediately so that New Mercy Outreach can continue its vital work for the homeless of Riverton Bay." I felt a hot flush of anger rise in my neck. Patricia placed a hand on my arm to steady me. "Your Honor," Patricia argued, standing up, "we have submitted the affidavit from Detective Monroe. We have the forensic accounting report showing $200,000 in unreported income. We have the wire transfer attempt to Nevis." "Circumstantial," Sterling interrupted. "Asset protection is not a crime." Judge Harrison rubbed his temples. He looked tired. He looked like a man who wanted to go to lunch. "The evidence is compelling, Ms. Hale," the judge said, "but without a formal indictment from the grand jury, which we do not have yet. Keeping a charity's funds frozen is a significant step. I am inclined to release the operating accounts for New Mercy, while keeping the personal accounts frozen." My heart dropped. If he released the New Mercy accounts, Leonard would drain them in an hour. He would claim it was for vendor payments and wire it all to a new shell company. We would lose. "Your Honor," the judge began, raising his gavel, "I am ready to rule." "If it pleases the court," A voice rang out from the back of the room. It wasn't a loud voice, but it had a timbre that cut through the drone of the HVAC system like a cello string. The judge paused, his gavel hovering in the air. "Who is that? This is a closed hearing." "I am an interested party, Your Honor," the voice said, "and I have evidence that is material to the ownership of the funds in question." I turned around. The Friday man was standing in the last row. He was wearing the same frayed black wool coat he wore to the soup kitchen. He held a battered leather briefcase in one hand. He looked out of place, like a ghost who had wandered into a board meeting. "Sir," the judge said, looking annoyed, "unless you are a lawyer representing one of the parties, you need to sit down." "I am not a lawyer," the man said, walking into the aisle. He moved with a slow, terrifying grace. "My name is Walter Hayes. I am the founder of the Hayes Foundry Group, and I am the grandfather of the plaintiff, Lucy Campbell." The silence that slammed into the room was absolute. It was a physical force. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Hayes, that was my mother's maiden name. But my mother had told me her father was a factory worker who died broke. She had told me he was a nobody. I looked at the wards. Vivian let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. She clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes bulging. Leonard turned the color of ash. He gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. They knew exactly who he was. "Walter Hayes," the judge repeated, his eyebrows shooting up. "The steel magnate." "The same," Walter said. He reached the gate that separated the gallery from the court floor. "May I approach, Your Honor?" "You may," the judge said, clearly intrigued. Walter walked past me. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the clerk's desk and placed a thick bound document on it. Then he turned to face the wards. Leonard couldn't meet his eyes. 20 years ago, Walter said, addressing the judge but looking at Leonard. "Mr. Leonard Ward was a junior consultant for a firm advising my company. He attempted to restructure our pension fund. I discovered that his restructuring involved skimming 3% of the workers' retirement money into a shell account he controlled. I fired him. I ensured he lost his license to practice financial advising. I thought I had removed him from my orbit." He paused, his gray eyes cold as steel. "Then my daughter, Lydia, ran away and married a man I did not approve of. I cut her off to teach her a lesson. It was a mistake, a prideful, foolish mistake. By the time I tried to fix it, she had died, and her daughter, Lucy, was in the system." I felt tears prick my eyes. I had never known why my mother had no family. "I watched Lucy from afar," Walter continued. "I wanted to help her, but then she met Ethan Ward, the son of the man who tried to steal from my workers." Walter pointed a finger at Leonard. It was a heavy, accusing finger. "I knew what they were," Walter said. "I knew that if I gave Lucy money, if I revealed myself and gave her the inheritance she is entitled to, the Ward family would smell the blood in the water. They would manipulate her. They would drain her dry. They are parasites, Your Honor, and you do not feed a host that is covered in leeches." "So you did nothing?" the judge asked softly. "I waited," Walter said. "I set up a trust, the Hayes Family Trust, but I added a clause, the character clause. It states that the beneficiary can only access the funds if she demonstrates, without my interference, the integrity to stand up to fraud, even when it comes from her own family. She had to prove she could protect the assets, or she would never get them." He turned to the clerk. "Exhibit A is a series of emails from Leonard Ward to my foundation, soliciting funds for New Mercy outreach, claiming he had a special relationship with the Hayes family. He used my name, without my permission, to give credibility to his scam." "And Exhibit B," Walter said, pulling a second document from his coat, "is the proof that $50,000 of the money currently frozen in the Northbridge account did not come from donors. It came from me. I had an operative make a donation last month, marked specifically for a building project that does not exist. They cashed the check. They moved it to the shell company within 4 hours." The judge looked at the documents. He looked at Leonard. Mr. Ward, is this true? Leonard tried to stand up, but his legs seemed to fail him. He slumped back down. It was a misunderstanding, an administrative error. It was theft, Walter said. His voice boomed now, filling the room, just like it was theft 20 years ago. Then, slowly, Walter turned to me. For the first time, he looked at me with the eyes of a grandfather, not the Friday man. There was pride there, and a deep, aching sadness. I sit at the 5th Street Haven soup kitchen every Friday morning, Walter said to the judge. I wear this coat. I eat the soup. I sit across from my granddaughter. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the light bulbs. I watched her starve, Walter said, his voice trembling slightly. I watched her lose her savings. I watched her come in with red eyes, beaten down by these people. I could have written a check at any moment. I could have ended it with a phone call. God knows I wanted to. He took a breath. But I needed to know. I needed to know if she would become like them. I needed to know if she would choose the easy way, if she would scream and beg and play the victim, or if she would do the hard thing, the Hayes thing. He gestured to the stack of files on my table, the honor packet, the spreadsheets, the transcripts. She chose the paper, Walter said. She didn't scream. She investigated. She didn't ask for a handout. She built a case. She stood in the soup line and she learned the value of a receipt. He turned back to the judge. That money in those accounts belongs to the people they scammed, Your Honor. And the evidence you have on your desk, it wasn't assembled by the FBI. It was assembled by a photographer who had $6 in her pocket and refused to let them write her story. The Hayes Foundation formally joins the motion to freeze all assets, Walter concluded. And we will be funding a forensic audit that will make the one on your desk look like a kindergarten project. Judge Harrison looked at Walter. He looked at me. Then he looked at the wards. Vivian was sobbing now, silent, ugly tears that ruined the last of her composure. Ethan was staring at me as if I had just turned into a dragon. The judge brought his gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. Motion to extend the freeze is granted, Judge Harrison ruled. Indefinitely, for all entities, personal and corporate. He leaned forward, glaring at Leonard. And given the new evidence regarding flight risk and the involvement of substantial funds from the Hayes Foundation, I am ordering the immediate surrender of all passports for Leonard Ward, Vivian Ward, and Ethan Ward. You are not to leave the jurisdiction of Riverton Bay. If you set foot near an airport, you will be detained pending the criminal hearing. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck again. Patricia Hale let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. My God, Lucy, you didn't tell me your grandfather was Walter Hayes? I didn't know, I whispered. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. I watched the bailiff move toward the wards to collect their passports. Leonard was arguing weakly. Vivian was clutching Ethan's arm. They looked small. They looked finished. I walked through the gate. Walter was waiting for me in the aisle. He looked tired. The command he had shown moments ago had faded, replaced by the weariness of an old man who had carried a heavy secret for too long. You let me eat soup, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. I did, Walter said. He adjusted his frayed coat. And you hated it, but you finished the bowl. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. When I was losing everything. Because if I had saved you, Walter said softly, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear, you would have spent the rest of your life fearing them. You would have thought they were powerful monsters that only money could fight. Now you know the truth. He glanced over my shoulder at the wards, who were being lectured by the bailiff. They are not monsters, Lucy. They are just sloppy accountants with bad morals. And you defeated them, not me. You. What happens now? I asked. Now, Walter said, offering me his arm. We go get lunch, a real lunch. I know a place that serves a steak that does not taste like boiled cabbage, and then we talk about your studio. I took his arm. It felt solid, real, as we walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look back at Ethan. I didn't look back at the family that had tried to erase me. I looked at the back of my grandfather's frayed coat, and I realized that the Friday man had given me something worth more than the $14,000 I had lost. He had given me the receipt, and I was going to keep it forever. The fall of the House of Ward did not happen with a bang. It happened with the quiet, rhythmic clicking of handcuffs and the scratching of pens on settlement documents. It was a cascade of failures, one support pillar snapping after another, bringing the entire rotten structure down in a cloud of legal dust. It started at the airport, 2 hours after Judge Harrison confiscated their primary passports and ordered them to stay in Riverton Bay. Detective Monroe received a ping from the TSA system at Riverton International. Leonard and Vivian Ward had checked in for a flight to Fort Lauderdale using passports they had reported lost 3 years ago. They were standing at Gate C4, wearing oversized sunglasses and trench coats that belonged in a bad spy movie, waiting to board a discount carrier because their credit cards for the luxury lines had been declined. I wasn't there to see it, but Monroe told me later with a grim satisfaction. She said Leonard tried to pull the "Do you know who I am" card on the uniformed officers. Vivian just slid to the floor and wept. Not because she was sorry, but because the priority boarding lane was closed to felons. They were arrested on charges of flight to avoid prosecution and violation of a court order. The bail hearing was set for Monday, and this time, there would be no release, while they were being processed in the holding cells downtown. Monroe executed the search warrant on their safety deposit box at Riverton Community Bank. I sat in the police station conference room as Monroe laid the contents out on the table. It was a treasure chest of petty grifting. There were stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands, about $40,000. There were Vivian's missing diamond earrings, which she had claimed an insurance payout for 2 years prior, but the real smoking gun was a stack of pristine, unactivated credit cards. Monroe fanned them out like a winning poker hand. "Look at the names. Lucy," she said. I looked. Lucy Campbell, Logan Campbell, Denise Holloway, even Patricia Hale, my legal aid lawyer. "They were farming you," Monroe said, shaking her head in disgust. "They took out cards in the names of everyone they knew, probably using social security numbers they swiped from tax forms or employment applications. They were keeping these as a reserve tank. If the charity money dried up, they were going to activate these and max them out." "Identity theft," I whispered. "That is a federal mandatory minimum." "It is," Monroe smiled. "And since they use the mail to receive them, it is also mail fraud. Leonard Ward is looking at 20 years before we even get to the money laundering." The discovery of the cards turned the tide. The institutions that had stonewalled me for weeks suddenly realized they were standing on the wrong side of a very large, very well-lit crime scene. The first domino to fall was Summit Crest Lending. Patricia Hale called me the next morning. Her voice, usually tired and clipped, sounded light, almost giddy. "You are not going to believe this," Patricia said. "The legal counsel for Summit Crest just called me. They received a copy of the police report regarding the safety deposit box and the forged signature analysis from the Hayes Foundation's experts. And," I asked, holding my breath. "They are terrified," Patricia laughed. "They realized they approved a $25,000 loan without proper know-your-customer verification. If the banking regulators find out, they could lose their license. So, they are making it go away." "What does that mean?" "It means the loan is gone. Lucy, wiped. They are classifying it as internal fraud loss. They are sending a letter to all 3 credit bureaus today, instructing them to remove the inquiry and the debt from your report immediately. They are also cutting a check for $5,000 to cover your inconvenience if you sign a waiver agreeing not to sue them for negligence." "I will sign it," I said. "I just want the score back." "You will have it," Patricia said. $750 by next week." The second domino was Riverton Community Bank. They couldn't claim ignorance anymore, not with the police raiding their own vault and dragging their VIP clients out in handcuffs. The branch manager, a man who had refused to take my calls for a month, phoned me personally. "Ms. Campbell," he said, his voice dripping with a synthetic, apologetic tone. We have completed our internal review regarding the disputed transactions on your savings account. It appears there were irregularities in how the authorization was handled. You mean you let my husband drain my life savings to buy a watch? I said flatly. We are reversing the charges, he said quickly. The full amount, $14,250.80. It will be in your account by this afternoon. We are also launching an investigation into the teller who processed the transfer without your physical presence. I'm closing the account, I said. As soon as the money hits, I am moving to a bank that doesn't finance theft. I understand, he said. We are very sorry for the stress this has caused. He wasn't sorry. He was scared of Walter Hayes. But the money hit my account at 2 p.m. I looked at the number on my screen. It was back, my studio fund. It felt different now. It wasn't just savings. It was reparations. The third domino was the one that hurt the most. Strangely, Fable Grid Studio. The morning after the Riverton Gazette ran the headline, Charity CEO and wife arrested in airport sting, I received an email from David. Subject urgent. Regarding your contract. Hi, Lucy. I wanted to reach out personally after seeing the news this morning. We were all shocked to read about what has been happening with the Ward family. It appears we were given incomplete information regarding the situation. We value your talent. Lucy, you have always been one of our best editors. I would like to formally apologize for the pause on your contract. We acted too hastily based on client concerns that were, it turns out, manufactured by the very people under investigation. We would love to have you back on the roster. We have a campaign for a new tech startup next week, and the lead photographer spot is yours if you want it. David. I stared at the screen. A month ago, I would have cried with relief. I would have typed back immediately, thanking him for the second chance. But I wasn't that Lucy anymore. That Lucy needed their validation. This Lucy had a billionaire grandfather and a folder full of evidence. I typed a reply. David, thank you for the note. I appreciate the apology. However, I am currently restructuring my business model and focusing on independent projects. I will let you know if my schedule opens up for freelance work in the future. Best, Lucy. I hit send. I wasn't going back to being their employee. I was going to be their competition. While I was reclaiming my life, the Ward empire was being dismantled brick by brick. The board of directors for New Mercy Outreach, facing a public relations nuclear winter, held an emergency meeting. They voted unanimously to suspend all fundraising operations and fire Leonard and Vivian Ward for cause. They hired an independent forensic auditing firm paid for, quietly, by the Hayes Foundation, to comb through 10 years of books. The preliminary report was leaked to the press 3 days later. It was devastating. It showed that 80 cents of every dollar donated to New Mercy Outreach never made it to the homeless. It went to Northbridge Consulting. It went to travel expenses. It went to lease payments on luxury cars. The orphanage in Haiti was a rented shed that had been empty for 5 years. The scholarship fund had exactly 0 recipients. The city of Riverton Bay turned on them. The same socialites who had sipped champagne at their galas were now giving interviews saying they always had a bad feeling about Leonard. The church they attended issued a statement distancing themselves from the alleged financial improprieties, and in the middle of the wreckage, a new face emerged. 5th Street Haven. Denise Holloway was interviewed by the local news station. She didn't shout. She stood in her kitchen, wearing her apron, and held up the brochure where the Wards had stolen the shelter's identity. They used our struggle to line their pockets. Denise told the camera, her voice steady. They promised us help, and they stole our name, but we are still here. We are still feeding people, because unlike them, we do the work. The station ran my photo, the black and white shot of the soup line, as the backdrop for the segment. They credited me photo by Lucy Campbell, local artist and whistleblower. Donations started pouring in, real donations, direct to 5th Street Haven. People who had been duped by New Mercy wanted to make it right. Denise called me, crying happy tears. They had enough money to fix the roof, buy a new walk-in freezer, and hire 2 more staff members. Finally, there was the Hayes Foundation. I met with Walter's legal team in a glass-walled conference room downtown. Walter sat at the head of the table, eating a bagel. The trust is active. The lead attorney, a sharp woman named Elena, told me, per the terms of the character clause, your grandfather has authorized the release of the initial tranche. She slid a folder across the table. This is not a handout, Walter said, chewing thoughtfully. It is a matching grant. The foundation will match every dollar you put into your studio, 2-to-1. It also covers a retainer for Elena here, who will be filing a civil suit against Leonard and Vivian to recover the rest of your stolen funds plus punitive damages. We are going to take the condo in Florida. We are going to take the SUV. We are going to take the watch. The watch is already listed on eBay, I said. Not anymore, Elena smiled. The police seized it as evidence. It will be auctioned eventually. We will buy it back for you if you want to smash it with a hammer. I don't want it, I said. I just want the space to work. Speaking of space, Walter said, check your email. I pulled out my phone. There was a message from the management company of the Pier Line Arts Quarter. Dear Ms. Campbell, we have reviewed your application for Studio 4B. We are very impressed with your portfolio and your recent public advocacy. We would be honored to have you as a tenant. We understand that startups can be cash flow sensitive. We have authorized a special emerging artist lease structure for you. 3 years, fixed rate, with the first 3 months rent-free to allow for build-out. Please let us know if this works for you. I looked up at Walter. You did this? I didn't pay them, Walter said, holding up his hands. I just made a phone call to the owner. I told him that you were the kind of tenant who pays her bills and keeps excellent records. Landlords like that. I signed the papers. The next day, I drove to the Pier Line Arts Quarter. I walked into the empty warehouse space. The sun was streaming through the high, dusty windows, illuminating the exposed brick and the concrete floor. It smelled of potential. I stood in the center of the room. It was mine. Not bought with stolen money. Not bought with a loan I couldn't afford. Bought with a fight. I took out my camera. I snapped a picture of the empty room. Then I checked my bank account. Balance: $28,500, the refund from the bank, plus the first disbursement from the trust. I was solvent. I was free. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the court system. Set up by Jade. Update bail. Denied for Leonard Ward and Vivian Ward. Defendants remanded to custody pending trial. I swiped the notification away. I didn't need to dwell on it. They were in a cage of their own making. I was in a studio of my own design. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, in the sprawling mess of Riverton Bay, people were waking up, going to work, struggling, lying, and loving, and I was going to photograph them all. But first, I had a date. It was Friday, and the soup was waiting. The Friday morning air was crisp, carrying the distinct scent of impending winter, that metallic, clean smell of frost on pavement. I stood outside the 5th Street Haven, but this time I was not shivering in a thin jacket, praying the soup wouldn't run out before I reached the front of the line. I was wearing a thick wool coat, a scarf that smelled of lavender laundry detergent, and I was holding my camera not as a shield, but as a tool. I was no longer a number in the system. I was the resident photographer for the Hayes Foundation's new initiative, Faces of Fridays. I walked through the doors. The smell was the same boiled vegetables and industrial disinfectant, but the energy was different. The desperation that usually hung over the room like a fog had lifted, replaced by a buzzing, frantic hope. Denise was standing by the serving counter. When she saw me, she didn't just nod. She rushed over, clutching a clipboard to her chest. Her eyes were red, but for the first time since I had known her, they were red from joy, not exhaustion. It cleared, she whispered, grabbing my arm. The wire transfer, it cleared this morning, I smiled. I told you it would. Lucy, she said, her voice shaking. Do you know what this means? We can fix the ventilation. We can open the overflow dormitory. We don't have to turn people away when it drops below freezing next month. I just signed the contract for the contractor. She held up the clipboard. I looked at the document. It was a grant agreement from the Hayes Foundation. It guaranteed operating costs for the next 5 years. And there, at the bottom, on the line for Project Proposer, was my name, Lucy Campbell. "You saved us," Denise said, a tear escaping and tracking through the flower on her cheek. "No," I said, gently correcting her. "We saved it. I just made sure the paperwork was in order." I moved through the room, lifting my camera. I wasn't taking photos of tragedy anymore. I was taking photos of dignity. I photographed the volunteers ladling soup with smiles that weren't forced. I photographed a man laughing as he broke bread with his neighbor. I was documenting the survival of a community that the Ward family had tried to cannibalize. Then, the door opened, and he walked in. Walter Hayes, my grandfather. He was wearing the same frayed black wool coat he had worn every Friday for the last year. He hadn't bought a new one. He hadn't upgraded to cashmere or hired a bodyguard. He walked with the same slow, deliberate shuffle, heading for the corner table. He didn't demand a seat. He didn't announce himself. He just sat down. I walked over to him. The light from the high window was hitting his profile, illuminating the deep lines of his face and the stubborn set of his jaw. "May I asked, raising my camera. He looked up. His gray eyes met the lens. He didn't smile, but his expression softened. "Make sure you get the coat," he said. "It has character." I snapped the shutter. Click. It was the best photo I had ever taken. It wasn't a picture of a billionaire. It was a picture of a man who knew that the only difference between the person serving the soup and the person eating it was a stroke of luck or a lack of receipts. I sat down across from him. He had 2 bowls of soup waiting. He pushed one toward me. "Eat," he commanded. "You look better, but you are still too thin." I picked up the spoon. It felt heavy and familiar in my hand. "Denise is crying over there," I said. "She says the grant is a miracle." "It is not a miracle," Walter grunted, dipping his bread. "It is a reallocation of resources. We took the money that was being stolen by thieves, and we gave it to the people who actually do the work. That is just good accounting." We ate in silence for a moment, the sounds of the busy kitchen washing over us. "I tried to find you," Walter said suddenly. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his soup. "Years ago, when you were in high school." I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth. "What?" "Your mother," he said, his voice thick with a regret that 50 years of money couldn't fix. "Lydia, I sent letters. I sent checks. I hired a private investigator to find out where you were living after she got sick." "She never told me," I whispered. "She told me we were alone. She told me you didn't care." "She sent the letters back," Walter said. "Unopened. She wrote a note on the back of the first one. 'We do not need your blood money. We are making it on our own.' She was stubborn. She had the Hayes pride. It is a dangerous thing, that pride. It killed her." He looked up at me then, his eyes intense. "I wanted to come for you when she died, but you were 18. You were angry, and then you met Ethan." He said the name like it was a curse word. "If I had given you the money then," Walter said, "if I had walked into your life and handed you a check for $1 million, what would have happened?" I thought about it. I thought about the Lucy of 4 years ago, naive, desperate for family, eager to please. I thought about Ethan's charm, Leonard's authority, Vivian's manipulative love. "They would have taken it," I said. "They would have drained me dry, and I would have let them, because I thought that was the price of being loved." "Exactly," Walter said. "Money cannot protect you if you do not know how to protect yourself. If I had given you the inheritance then, I would have just been funding Leonard Ward's retirement. I would have been feeding the sharks." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His skin was rough, like sandpaper. "I had to wait," he said softly. "I had to watch you struggle. It broke my heart. Lucy, every Friday, sitting here, seeing you hungry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the world down for you." "But you didn't," I said. "I couldn't," he said. "You had to learn. You had to learn the difference between noise and power. You had to learn that screaming gets you pity, but documentation gets you justice. I needed to know if you would choose the receipts or the drama. I chose the receipts, I said. You did. Walter nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. And now? The money will not kill you. Now. The money is a tool. You are the fortress now. Lucy, not the victim. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Patricia Hale, my lawyer. Update: Leonard and Vivian denied bail again. Judge cited significant flight risk. Ethan has accepted the plea deal. He is turning over 3 years of internal emails in exchange for a reduced sentence. He is testifying against his parents. I looked at the message. A month ago, seeing Ethan's name would have sent me into a panic attack. Now, it was just data. Ethan was doing exactly what a coward does. He was selling out the people he claimed to love to save his own skin. News? Walter asked. Ethan took the deal, I said, putting the phone away. He is testifying. Of course he is, Walter scoffed. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. You do not need to be there. You know, the lawyers will handle it. You never have to see his face again. I know, I said, and the realization washed over me like a warm wave. I didn't have to face him. I didn't have to listen to his excuses or his gaslighting. I had built a wall of paper so high and so thick that he could never touch me again. Come, Walter said, standing up. I want to see the studio. We drove to the Pier Line Arts Quarter. The warehouse space was no longer empty. It smelled of fresh paint and developing fluid. I had set up my lights, my backdrops, and my workstations, but the centerpiece of the room was the large print hanging on the main wall. It was a black and white photograph, blown up to 4 feet by 6 feet. It showed the line at the 5th Street Haven, taken from behind. You could see the slump of shoulders, the worn coats, the exhaustion in the posture of the people waiting, and in the middle of the line, slightly out of focus but unmistakable to me, was a woman with messy hair and a camera bag clutched to her chest. It was me, from a year ago, a ghost of the girl who thought she was broken. Beneath the photo, on a small brass plaque, was the title, We Keep the Receipts. Walter stood in front of it for a long time. He clasped his hands behind his back. It is a good title, he said finally. It is a warning and a promise. It is my story, I said. Leonard tried to write it. Vivian tried to write it. Even my mother tried to write it. But I took the pen back. You did more than take the pen, Walter said, turning to me with a grin that made him look 20 years younger. You bought the whole printing press. We left the studio as the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the cobblestone streets of Riverton Bay. It was late afternoon on a Friday. One more stop, I said. I am full. Walter protested. No more soup. Just for tea, I said. And to sit. We walked back to the 5th Street Haven. The dinner rush was over. The volunteers were wiping down the tables. The room was quiet, settling into the evening. We sat at our usual table in the corner. I went to the counter and brought back 2 cups of hot tea. I looked around the room. This place, which had once been a symbol of my failure, was now the foundation of my victory. I had been stripped down to nothing within these walls, and I had rebuilt myself using the scraps I found here. I looked at Walter. He was blowing on his tea, watching the steam rise. You know, he said softly, when you are rich, truly rich, people think you are loud. They think you take up space, but the real power is quiet. The wards, they were loud. They needed the galas, the watches, the noise. They needed everyone to look at them to prove they existed. He took a sip. But look at us. Lucy, we are just 2 people drinking tea in a soup kitchen. We have the truth in a folder. We have the trust in the bank. And we don't need to say a word. It is quiet, I agreed. It is finally quiet. See, Walter said, gesturing with his cup toward the empty room. When you keep the story safe with paper, the noise of the idiots just fades away. They scream, they cry, they lie. But the paper waits. And eventually, the paper wins. I smiled. I reached into my bag and pulled out my camera one last time. I didn't take a picture. I just held it in my lap, feeling the weight of it, the cold metal against my palms. I wasn't a victim of the Ward family drama. I wasn't the unstable daughter-in-law. I wasn't the charity case. I was Lucy Campbell. I was a Hayes. And I was the woman who had turned a receipt into a revolution. I took a sip of my tea, listening to the silence, and for the first time in my life, I didn't hear a single thing I needed to prove to anyone. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people.